It's good to be with you on the Lord's Day morning to open up God's Word and see what we can learn from it. I would mention that I did know Max Miller and Alberta and Ori, and Sue Furlan is related to that group, so she thought that it'd be good just to kind of dedicate this day to Max. The music would be something that he would remember, and so we do that, and we need to honor people that we've journeyed with in our Christian lives. So this morning, Abigail and David. Now that might be a strange sermon title, but I didn't know what else to do with it. Be honest, I wasn't going to spend a lot of time with something clever. It's about Abigail and David. It's about a few other people too, but it's very rich. And so this morning we're going to go down that road with a Bible story. Basically, I'm going to tell you a Bible story. Now, we kind of relegate Bible stories to the kids. But you know what? The Bible is a book of stories. We need to interest people. I've spent my life trying to teach and encourage people to understand and read the Bible, and we need to understand it's stories. It happens to be stories, and we all like stories, so I just wanted to kind of whet your appetite just a little bit there with this today. Over the years, a lot of couples have been influential in history. Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt. She became his legs because he was in a wheelchair. Ronald and Nancy Reagan. You can read stories about how that was a real pair. He was the president, but she was the one who kind of kept all those people away from him at times and really helped with the direction of things. If you're an old movie buff, Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn had a special chemistry on the screen. In fact, we watched one of their last movies, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? It's an old movie, but it's a great movie. You ought to watch it. It's very contemporary with today. In fact, it's made in 1967, but it really fits today. The British monarchy, Princess Diana and King Charles had those two boys, and so they've married, and so William and Kate and Harry and Meghan, if I got that all right, are quite noteworthy in the news. So couples have made that difference. And I just was thinking as I prepared for this, I'm assuming you're a student of people like I am. I think as Christian people, we need to learn from other people. And so through the years, I have benefited and learned from many people. And in college, I worked for an older minister. And he said, now, Doug, you can learn from everybody. You can learn how not to do it from some and how to do it from others. Now, that's sage advice. It's not very fancy, but it is true. Also, same gentleman took me to the hospital one day to do hospital calling. He said, now, Doug, you won't get many converts in the hospital doing this, but it's where Jesus would be and where he'd want you to be. And I've always remembered that. And some of you that are old enough to remember, did you ever remember singing the little chorus in Sunday school, Only a Boy Named David, Only a Little Sling? Oh, there's nodding of heads. I didn't know. So, we're in this series of sermons that Jason has outlined for us. And he gave you some information on David, and I'm just going to add just a little bit to that this morning. He's quoted over 1,000 times in the New Testament. I think that means he's pretty important, it would to me. We are New Testament Christians, but we need to read the Old Testament. And I think sometimes we fail to read the Old Testament like we should. And he does really represent a personal type of Jesus in that Old Testament. The Psalms are the most quoted Old Testament piece in the New Testament. And more contemporary is the fact that if you go to Israel today, the planes and tanks have the Star of David on it. In fact, I'm told, the guy that led the trip told us this, so I believe him, but I wonder about this. He said you cannot have a statue in Israel, except one, statue of David. That's the only one there is what he said. Now, maybe you can Google that and find out, maybe, and if I'm wrong, tell me, because I've used that a few times. But at any rate, we have so much to be blessed by. And as I understand it, David didn't just instantly become king. Now, where we're at today, he's not the king yet. Saul's still alive. But he will eventually be king. But his process of becoming a king is a 15-year process. And we can learn a lot from just, that's why Jason's got this series going, is we can learn from David's life a great deal. And it wasn't rosy all the time, folks. And in case you're sitting here this morning wondering why life's been pretty hard, well, it was hard for David, and he was the greatest king of the Old Testament. And we can learn from that. And of course, we all know he was a man after God's own heart. I think we know that, but I don't think we understand it. I don't think we think about it enough. He was a man after God's own heart, even though he made many mistakes. He had many victories, but he made many mistakes. And so this morning, and again, these sermons in the life of David, we're looking at it also as his interaction with other people. So that thus we have Abigail this morning. And so actually, David at this juncture is still running from Saul, and he's even had chances to kill Saul, and he didn't do it. He said, I cannot kill the Lord's anointed one. And so today, as we look at this, 1 Samuel 25, just so if you got a Bible, it's going to be on the screen. I appreciate Jenna doing some extra work. I said, could you put this on the screen? I do have new glasses, but I'm still going to trust me reading the screen, so I'm going to read it on my Bible. It is the NIV, like this on the screen, but the NIV has been through different versions. Mine might be a little more ancient than yours, but it'll be close, okay? And I just want us to go through here, and I've just picked out some things for us to think about here for just a moment. But again, it's a fascinating story, and just one verse here says, 1 Samuel 25, now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Now that verse just boom right there, and then we'll find David going down into the desert of Maon or Paran. And you think, well, what's the big deal here? Well, the big deal is Samuel anointed David. Samuel is the last, I believe, of the judges, so he acts as a bridge between that period of the judges and what is going to be the kingship or monarchy, which Saul is already the king, but he's failed, and he's on his way out. And David is going to be next. And here's this verse. And as I thought about that a little bit, well, you know, Samuel was David's mentor in so many ways. And it got me to thinking about some of the people that I owe a lot to in my life. And I remember back, I can't even give you the exact year, but in 1 year, I had 3 men that died, and I had all 3 of them's funeral, and they all impacted my life in a great way. And I probably shared this with you before, but it fits today, so I'm going to throw it out there again. A.K. Miller, which would have been Max Miller's uncle, was influential greatly in my family, in that little church for 9 years, baptized me, influenced my dad and my brother and me. Probably we all went into ministry largely because of the influence of A.K. Miller. And then Albert Newland was, for 3.5 years, after Bible college, I worked with him. It was an invaluable experience. I've always said that my dad and Brother Newland probably were the most influential men in my life. And then another gentleman, Bob McDonald, was a retired preacher, and He always wanted to sit down and talk, and that's the way Bob talked. He wanted to talk about the church and the Bible, and we did. So I just thought about Samuel's role in David's life, and David now is out on his own, and Samuel, who anointed him, is gone. And I was thinking, well, you know, those three men were influential in my life, and I have to carry on. And, you know, we all have to carry on with our work in the church and the Lord. Every last one of us here has a role. And those who influenced you go on, and now who are you going to influence is a question we all need to think about. So 1 Samuel 25 goes then into, after that very first statement, it's in fact, we're still in the first verse. Then David moved down into the desert of Maon, or Paran, it can be, and a certain man in Maon who had property at Carmel was very wealthy. Now you got to find out how wealthy this guy is. He had 1,000 goats. Now I know there's some goats raisers in this church here. How about 1,000? 3,000 sheep. That's a bunch. We used to have a sheep right across the road from us there, but they're gone now, and wasn't anywhere close to 3,000. But man, that's a bunch. Which he was shearing now. It's shearing time, and that's kind of a celebration time there. And his name was Nabal. Now, you don't want to forget this guy because he's Abigail's husband for some years. And his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was a Calebite, and he was surly and mean in his dealings. Now, we've all met surly, haven't we? And we've met mean. And this guy is every bit the place, surly and mean. Well, I won't sit there too long because we don't want to be surly and mean. But she, on the other hand, was beautiful. And yet again, that can even have application to maybe to a beautiful inner life, not just physical beauty, which she obviously was. And so his name meant a dog. Now, you got to remember, folks, that it's a whole different world today about dogs. Dogs in this day were just very low on the totem pole. Now, today, dogs are almost worshipped. But at any rate, and I had dogs and enjoyed dogs, so I'm not anti-dog, but I'm just saying, when he's called a dog, it's not complimentary, folks. And so we find out that this is the case. So, verse 4 says, while David was in the desert, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men, and he said to them, go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Now listen to how David says this. Say to him, long life to you, good health to you and to your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now, that's a pretty good opening, folks, when you greet people. So David wasn't stirring the pot. David wasn't trying to be a smart aleck. David was going to ask a favor, and he sincerely complimented him. Now, verse 7 says, now I hear that it is sheep shearing time, and when your shepherds were with us. Now, this is David talking. This is what he said. We did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my young men. Since we have come at a festive time, please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them. And when David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. And look at the Bible. It says, and then they waited. Now we're talking about old brother Surly here has received the message. The men had been sent by David, and here they are. And this guy's response is one of being rude and unconcerned. Now, if you study this a little further, and some of the stuff came out of commentaries, and I thought, well, I'll venture out into the internet, see what they say. Well, some of it's pretty good, and some of it's not. See, there is a school of thought out there that says, well, David was in the business of, I don't know what they call it, but it's when people pay money to have protection. Okay? I don't know the text doesn't say anything about that, but if that be the case, I would assume David was providing something that guy really needed. So based upon that, that's why he hears about sheep shearing time, which is a celebratory time, and so he's going to go down there. The guys are hungry. That's what's going on here. Hey, could you give us anything to eat? And Nabal, in verse 10, answered David's servants. Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and meat that I have slaughtered for my shears and give it to men coming from who knows where? Well, he knows where because they had encountered David and his men. And David and his men, you'll see, have treated them pretty good. David's men turned and went back. Okay, this is Nabal's response. Now, when they reported every word, David said, put on your swords. Now, David's mad, probably as he should be. So they put on their swords, and David put on his. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. They tell me 400 was a pretty decent group of troops, if you like, for most battles, at least to start with. But it left 200 back. Could have brought 600. But here's every story has somebody that's just really on. Verse 14, one of the servants now of Nabal told Nabal's wife Abigail, David sent messengers to the desert, from the desert to give our master his greeting, and he hurled insults at them. What kind of a guy is this? You try to compliment him and he just goes negative on you. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us. The whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. So there was integrity with these guys. They weren't stealing. They weren't mistreating them. Night and day, they were a wall around us, and when we were herding our sheep near them. Now, think it over and see what you can do. Get this, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. Now, here's the key guy in the story, really. He goes to Abigail and says, hey, you better do something because we're in trouble. A lot of trouble. It's just fascinating when we see what kind of a woman that she is, and she does respond in a very wonderful way. Verse 18 says, Abigail lost no time. Now, ladies, women can get the job done, can't they? Yeah. She lost no time. Some years ago when I first started at the hospital, there was this one charge nurse that she jokingly said, and if you've seen some movie that has a mean nurse in it, Nurse Ratched, I guess. Yeah, some of you have seen it. She said, if you want me to be Nurse Ratched, I'll do it. One of the younger nurses needed help. But I told her one time, I said, you know, if I ever needed anything done, I think you nurses would do it. She said, Doug, we'd get her done. So this is Abigail here. She lost no time. She took, now, you wait and see what she did. She took 200 loaves of bread. I can't imagine. 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain. A seah is about a bushel, so we got 5 bushels of grain, and 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys, and then she told her servants, go on ahead, I'll follow you. And ladies, you understand this next verse? But she did not tell her husband Nabal. Isn't that great? I tell you what, she sprung into action, but she didn't tell that guy what she was up to. That was just another one of her fine qualities that we're going to see in this story here today. And again, it's here's this servant who said, you know what? Here's what happened. You better do something. And she sprung into action. I mean, this is an amazing woman, and that's why she's worthy of talking about here this morning. So verse 20 says, as she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. Now, I think she's figured out right now, David's going to be mad, and here come his men. So it took a lot of courage, I would say, for her to go ahead. Verse 21, David had just said, get this, it's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the desert so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. And then David tells you how mad he is. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him. We're going to take them all out, is what David's saying. And when Abigail saw David, and this is fantastic. She quickly got off her donkey. She bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, my Lord, let the blame be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. May my Lord pay no attention to that wicked man Nabal. He's just like his name. His name means a fool, and folly goes with him. But as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my master sent. This is a smart woman. I didn't know these guys came. And it's marvelous how she handles this. Now, you might be saying, why in the world is such a wonderful woman, attractive, capable? I mean, she's taken on a huge deal. What in the world was she doing married to a guy like Nabal? Well, we don't know. We can suspect arranged marriage, possibly. And, there's a lot. When you read a Bible story, you can ask a lot of questions, and that's good, but you can't answer them all. So don't get too upset if you can't answer them all, but that might just be a possibility. But she said, I didn't see the guy these guys that came. Now, it says, now, since the Lord has kept you, my master, from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, as surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, may your enemies and all who intend to harm my master be like Nabal. And let this gift, which your servant has brought to my master, be given to the men who follow you. Let me stop right there. Now, again, David just said, hey, this is a festival, and there's celebration. We don't have to have the main course, just give us something to eat. That's really what he was asking for. And then she's going to outdo the festival, I think, with what she's brought for these guys. And then she says, please forgive your servant's offense, for the Lord will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my master, because he fights the Lord's battles. Now, this woman understands what David's all about. He's anointed of the Lord, and he's here on the Lord's side. Let no wrongdoing be found in you as long as you live. How about that? You ever think about encouraging somebody, some kid that's kind of needs some help, and you could say something like that? Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my master will be bound securely in a bundle of the living by the Lord your God, but the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as the pocket of a sling. So she evidently knows about Goliath, doesn't she? She says, when the Lord has done my master every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him leader over Israel, my master will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord has brought my master success, remember your servant. Now, wow. We talked about how she had hospitality. I mean, she's bringing the feed bag, folks. And all he asked for was just a little nourishment for his men. Little side note here. I heard this recently in Iowa now. In Iowa, 1 in 10 adults lives in poverty. Now, I don't know about you, but that just kind of strikes me. My goodness sake. In Iowa, we don't think anybody lives in poverty. This is the breadbasket of the world. And 1 in 8 kids, this is the one that really hurts, 1 in 8 kids goes home from school not knowing where supper is going to come from. Well, Abigail had hospitality. I would hope that we as Christian people would have hospitality. I would hope that the church has hospitality because we really don't want anybody to go hungry. She certainly had respect there in verse 23. When she saw David, she hurried and dismounted from her donkey. She fell on her face before him. She bowed to the ground. She respected his authority in this meeting. And of course, she told him, I didn't see the guy that you sent. You know, our world, now she had proper respect for authority. We live in a country who for the last, I'll say 50 years, it's probably longer than that, but we have despised authority. There was a time when they were burning draft cards in the United States flag up until now, throwing bricks through windows and harming police and all. We got a lot of issues going on here. I'm not telling you anything new, but that certainly wasn't the case of Abigail. And just a little bit on authority. We have decimated the American family in the years that I have been alive. We have completely decimated the American family, and part of that is an authority issue. That we don't respect authority, that parents aren't worthy of respect, parents haven't shown proper respect for the kids, parents haven't demanded respect. Now, by demand, that doesn't sound good, but I mean, because of the way you live and because you're a Christian, then the authority issue flows from Scripture on down to the family. And when I came across that, I just thought, here's Abigail showing the proper authority to David. We quote the Great Commission, Matthew 28:18 through 20, which we should. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you, and I'll be with you always. Do you know what precedes that verse? Jesus says, all authority is vested in me on heaven and on earth. So, folks, the authority comes from God through his Son, Jesus Christ, into proper roles in families and society, and we need to stay close to that. That's why it's important. And you know what else? It just happens to work. Because it's God's design. Well, her speech that we've looked at is wonderful. And verse 32. So here's David. Here's his response to this outstanding woman. David said to Abigail, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own words. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. That's quite a statement. That's quite a confession. Here is something about David's character, the man after God's own heart, that he would listen to this unknown woman who came from a foolish husband. Verse 35, then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. Wow, I find that to just be a captivating, wonderful story. And again, her speech, let's just recap it a little bit here, is she was generous. You know, Proverbs 28:27, so that'll be easy to remember. 28:27, he who gives to the poor will lack nothing, but he who closes his eyes to them receives many curses. She asked for forgiveness. Again, we quoted Ephesians 4:32, be kind, compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God has forgiven you. She apologized. She used good judgment. Verse 33, well, Proverbs 1:7 says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. I mean, this woman has got it together. She did something she really didn't have to do. She really put herself out on the edge completely, and David's response was very appropriate. He understood this woman was right, and he probably realized she was sent of God, actually. So, the last scene, verses 33 through 38, really. We see, well, actually, it's farther down. Verse 36, when Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet of that of a king. Now, see, he isn't a king, but she said, the writer says, that of a king. And he was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing until daybreak. Now there again, you can't reason with a drunk, and she knew that, and so she waited till morning. So she told him nothing till daybreak, and then in the morning when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed, and he became like a stone. Some would say a heart attack or a stroke, whatever the case may be. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, praise to the Lord who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. And then David sends word and said, she's a widow now. He's died. 10 days later, and why don't you come and be my wife? And now you're probably going to get all worked up about the multiple wives of David, but you got to remember a few things. One was, at this point in Bible history, that wasn't uncommon and not necessarily frowned upon, although it was problematic. Later on in New Testament scriptures, it will be one woman, one man, and that's a whole nother series of lessons probably, but at any rate, so she went and became his wife, and verse 41 said she bowed down with her face to the ground and said, here is your maidservant, ready to serve you and to wash the feet of my master's servants. And Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 maids, went with David's messengers and became his wife. Well, again, we can't belabor the point, but I hope that you have been captivated a little bit by this story, this man, David, this woman, Abigail, the servant who said, disaster's about ready to happen. It's just a fascinating story. But again, she was intelligent, she was beautiful, she was active, she had hospitality, she was generous, she was forgiving, she was sensible. And again, her godliness and her willingness to take a bad situation. And again, as I said with David, he's a man of many flaws, but the Bible says he's a man after God's own heart. And let me close this morning with this thought. David is a type of Jesus in the Old Testament, and we can learn a lot from him, and I hope you're willing to learn from a lot of people, but what we have to learn the most is, what is the design of every Christian supposed to be? It is to become like Jesus Christ. I think today we've gotten so far away in the church and other places in what's the real issue. The real issue is to be a follower of Jesus Christ and to become more like him every day. And I'll close with Galatians 4:19, and only the women get the full impact of the verse, but Paul says, "My dear children, I am in pains of childbirth until Christ be formed in you." That's my plea.